Hi everyone, and welcome to National Graduate Week. I'm Eloise from Career Map, and it's good to see so many of you on today. I hope you're really excited to hear from prospects, and they have lots of top tips for you about the transition from student to graduate. Just before we get started, just to let you know, the session will be recorded, so if there's any top tips that you definitely want to remember, you will be able to come back to this. Also, definitely take notes while you're going, but you will have it to come back to as well. There are already some links in the chat that you can click on if you want to find out more, and I'll put those in again at the end, so don't worry if you lose them, but if you can see them now in the chat, you can click on them, bookmark them for later. The chat function is open for you to ask any questions, make any comments, things that you want to say, or questions we'll do normally at the end, but you might have some of them picked up during the presentation by the speakers as well. So definitely put them in if they're relevant and if you've got things that you want to ask. And if you have any technical difficulties, if you can't hear us, if you can't see the slides or anything, put that in the chat as well, and I will be keeping an eye on it for you. So with all that said, I would love to introduce to you the team at Prospects, and we're going to get started.
Well, thank you very much, Eloise, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to Becoming a Graduate. My name is Chris. I work for Prospects, which is the home of Prospects AC UK, and that's your essential careers and employability service. And I'm going to plug it because it's important for everything that you're doing at the moment, really. So if you haven't signed up for Prospects, I recommend that you do so, particularly our planner and job match tools, which we'll come to a little later on, but they help you understand the sheer wealth of opportunities that are available for graduates. And that, of course, is the whole point of this webinar and National Graduate Week. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Amber from Grad Consult and Asha from GISC, which is Prospect's parent company. So Amber will be talking about why SMEs, which are small to medium-sized enterprises, offer such great opportunities for graduates. Now, actually, SMEs, and you may have come across them already, of course, in your job hunting and career planning, but they're often overlooked and they're a very important part of the overall picture. Then Asha will be sharing her experiences as an early careers recruitment specialist, and she'll give you insights into what GISC looks for in its graduate recruits and what it offers, and general insights in how to prepare yourself for things like assessment centres and actually onboarding larger organisation. So that's how we're going to cover everything off, and it's a huge subject, so we're not going to be able to tell you everything you need to know about how to become a graduate, but happily there are loads of other sessions this week that will also help sort of colour in the overall space. But I wanted to say something to begin with about just how important graduates are, really, and how graduates fit into the bigger job market. And the term graduate recruitment or graduate jobs, graduate labour market, they've been around for many, many years. But sometimes nowadays employers refer to all of this as like early talent or early careers recruitment. But there is an idea that there's something particular about graduates that separates them from the rest of the job market. And although all those job markets overlap in lots of places, of course, it is possible to talk about graduates being different because there are certain characteristics that graduate jobs have compared to non-graduate jobs. Now, at one time, graduate employment, it used to be very much a minority activity, and that's because university was a minority activity compared to nowadays. And actually, even though today most 18-year-olds still won't go to university, the participation is much closer to 50% of all people. And graduate employment or early careers employment, whatever we call it, it's a normal sort of mainstream part of the job market. That also includes things like work experience and internships and placements, etc. And a lot of the job market has been, this is quite an ugly word actually, but graduatized, meaning that it's a requirement or certainly an advantage to have a degree when you're working in certain sectors and occupations. But it's important to say as well that a graduate job, it's not just a job done by a graduate, because obviously as a graduate, or as a student, you can do all sorts of work. But what graduate job generally means, it's professional level work. And that's something which, as I say, having a degree is a requirement or distinct advantage. And you may not ever hear this, but sometimes you get a bit of stereotypical language circulating around the media to the effect of things like, oh, there are no decent jobs for graduates, or graduates, they just end up working in low-paid jobs, which is a sort of reflection of the actual mass participation of university education, as if somehow the job market hasn't kept up with the supply. But actually, that's absolutely not true. So the most recent survey of graduate destinations and outcomes, which is called the Graduate Outcomes Survey, and many of you, probably most of you, once you've graduated, will be asked to do this survey, which takes place 15 months after you leave university. And it's to find out where graduates are, what they're working in, what they're doing, etc. Well, that most recent survey found that more than 70% of those graduates who were in employment were in professional level work. And that's a typical level every year that survey's done. Sometimes it's a bit higher. And the remaining percentage of people who weren't at that point, many of them were waiting to enter professional level work, or they're on a development path towards it. So actually, the reality is the demand for professional type work, the kind of graduate type work, actually does outstrip the supply, and is expected to well into the foreseeable future. So graduates are always going to be in demand, which is a really important thing for you to know. It should give you confidence in the fact of what you're doing is important and will give a good outcome for you, but also means that you are desirable for employers and for society and the economy generally. And there's quite a lot of things that employers want from graduates. So it's not just the technical skills it required doing a degree, however vocational that was. It isn't necessarily sometimes the subject of your degree at all. Obviously, if you're going to very specific roles, technical jobs and vocational jobs, yes, absolutely. But for like jobs in many sectors, I don't know, like finance, business, teaching, marketing, a whole host of them, it's not necessarily the subject of your degree that counts, but you. So many employers don't actually ask for a specific degree qualification. And the UK is quite unusual in this respect. Some other countries, particularly in Europe, are very, very specific and prescribed about all of this. But for example, most of the jobs on the Prospects website, they don't ask for a specific degree or particular degree. But what employers do generally ask for is, or look for, or want, or find interesting or desirable are values and qualities. So we've just taken these at random from some of the jobs currently on our site, on the Prospect site at the moment, and we put a link in for it at the beginning of the chat. So it's all words like inquisitive, curiosity, and curious. That comes up a lot, actually. The idea that graduates are interested and always looking for new things and are curious about how the world works and how business works. And a very important one at the bottom there is a willingness to learn. They actually said this in this particular job ad. We don't expect you to be an expert, but we're looking for our future leaders. And again, underscoring that point, the whole process for this particular job says that it's looking at the whole self, a very holistic view, all about experiences. And when you've been learning about employability at university, of course, that is not just about the work that you've done, but it's your attitude and your disposition and the preparation and training that you've done. So they make sure it's all balanced with the academic stuff. And then finally, just to underscore the overall point, this is good. Yes, you will, of course, need a degree because it's a graduate job. But as they say there, it could be in any subject. And it's what here, evidence of your commitment to your chosen career path, etc. And that's another important point, is showing that you're serious. And this sounds dead obvious, but sometimes it's easy to overlook. When you're applying for jobs or presenting yourself to an employer, etc., showing that you're serious and knowledgeable and earnest about that particular job, that occupation, or that industry sector. And they're all important qualities and attributes, and they're all important ways that you sort of present yourself. So fundamentally, it is about you. So your attitude, experiences, skills, your motivations, your interests, and all of those. And learning how to present all those qualities and attributes, that's the important thing. And this is something, I'm going to mention this more than once, that your University Careers Service can help you with, along with lots of other things as well, getting you ready to make that transition and tying all of those things together into a very attractive package. We're going to look at very briefly at what jobs graduates do. And we've just taken the top 10 professional level jobs, and it's really just by way of illustration, because this is just the surface, really. There's so much more. And graduates go into all types of work, in all types of sectors, in all types of industries, etc. But these are the top 10 from the last survey. And it's notable that nursing actually is by far and away the number one graduate occupation, simply because there's so many people in university training to be nurses and other types of medical professionals. But you'll see teaching very well represented in there, IT work, accountancy, business, HR, marketing. And within those broad categories, of course, you've got loads of different types of specific job and occupation, etc. So that's just really by way of illustration of how important graduates are, how important you will be and are at the moment already to the general sort of prosperity of the UK in terms of the job market, society, and core occupations such as teaching and health, etc. And really emphasises just the breadth of the occupations that are available. And for many of those graduates sitting under those categories, they will not necessarily have studied a relevant subject at university. And just by one example amongst many, almost 15% of humanities graduates, they go on to work in marketing and PR and sales, which you could argue not necessarily what they've trained for when they've been or been exposed to when they've been studying, say, English or history. But of course, many of the things that they'll acquire and the skills that they'll develop on those sorts of courses and their understanding of creativity and literacy and communication, etc., makes people very suitable for those sorts of gregarious communicative roles. And as I say, that is just one example amongst many. I've mentioned Planner and Job Match, and all of this, what we're talking about now, is very, very relevant to these two tools. So if you use them on the Prospects site, just ask you to go through some various reflective or self-reflective exercises to help you understand yourself a bit more and to describe your interests and your motivations. And then you're matched up with more than 500 different jobs based upon suitability, drawn from what you've revealed about yourself in terms of your alignment and everything else. It's a really good way to stimulate thinking about your options, because I'm guessing that many of you on this session at the moment and the others throughout National Graduate Week, you're not necessarily clear about exactly where you want to go. And the most common question that we get asked that leads people to the Prospects website, and it's the same for other providers and career service, is that fundamental question: what can I do with my degree? Or what can I do with my degree in this? And where can I go with it? And Planner and Job Match and career services generally, they're really there to help you understand that you have got a tremendous array of options in front of you. And if you work through these sorts of exercises and take your time to think about your development, it's a really important way to get you ready for the all-important next step, which is actually applying for jobs. So use Planner and Job Match in association with the other careers guidance on our website and your careers service. And we really can't recommend your careers service highly enough. If you're not using it already, please make sure you do before you leave university. And you can also use it once you've left as well, because they're there to help you in your journey into the future, wherever that will take you. And on that point, actually, it's a very important thing to say that becoming a graduate is not just about getting ready to enter the job market. That's a big part of it, but not the only part. So every year, thousands of graduates go on to do further study, which is usually referred to as postgraduate study. And in the last survey, the Graduate Outcomes Survey, it established that around 10%, almost 10% of all graduates did this. So 50 months after leaving university, 10% of graduates were actually doing postgraduate study. And in this century, since the year 2000, further study is really grown in popularity. And again, that used to be a sort of minority part of a minority pursuit of university education generally. But today there are more than 500,000 postgraduate students in the UK, and they're studying a great range of subjects, masters and PG diplomas and conversion courses and PhDs and MReses, a whole set of things in lots and lots of different subjects. It's often used, postgraduate study, as a gateway to a new career path, or it may be a precondition for entry into professions such as teaching or the law. So if you've done a geography or chemistry or history degree at undergraduate level and you want to become a lawyer or a teacher, you'll have to do a conversion course in order to do that. So that's a postgraduate study program. And the UK universities, they offer some of the best postgraduate courses in the world, and the subjects are as varied and interesting as they are at undergraduate level. It's definitely a step up, postgraduate study, in terms of academic challenge and personal commitment, but the rewards are really, really significant in terms of personal development, acquisition of skills, technical knowledge, and also having, done the challenge as well of managing yourself throughout that period. The ability to do postgraduate study has been massively improved in the last few years by the introduction of very comprehensive loan schemes for masters and doctoral studies. And that's opened it up even further to people who might otherwise have thought twice about going on to do further study. And certainly employers, just as they love the things that graduates possess, they also love the qualities that you acquire and the attributes that you develop when you're doing postgraduate study, particularly around organisation and self-directed work and research and all of that sort of thing. So again, plugging prospects and career services, but we've got loads of information. We've got a postgraduate database, which is a good place to start. And you should, again, talk to your tutors and careers advisors if you think that postgraduate study might be for you as the next step after university. And it's dead important to say there's no rush for any of this in terms of further study. The culture of lifelong learning that we have nowadays and permanent development, etc. Postgraduate study, it might be something you come to further down the line along with other forms of training and improvement, or it might be something that you choose to do once you've got a job as part of specific career development. But it's definitely part of the range of options that you should be thinking about when you're preparing to become a graduate. And related, but a different topic, but again, it illustrates something very important about the job market, really, and your role in it, and that is geographical mobility. So having mentioned a myth about the job market previously, there is another one that knocks around, which says that graduates are highly mobile geographically. They'll go to work wherever the best opportunities are available. And usually that's understood in terms of having to move to London or the Southeast. And it's true that London and the Southeast does have a concentration of businesses and opportunities for graduates. Got a very, very strong graduate job market. But you don't have to move there just to get a good job. Because the reality is that the vast majority of graduates, well over 60%, actually work in the home region, having stayed there to go to university or return there after studying in another region. So if you're from the Northwest or the East Midlands or the Southwest, etc., odds are that you've not left there in the first place, or if you have, you've returned home or to your hometown or city or region to work. There are really powerful graduate job markets throughout the UK, mainly as you'd expect in large urban areas such as Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, Glasgow, Nottingham, Birmingham, any of the major cities, towns or conurbations. But also in other parts of the country as well, in less urban areas, there's still important graduate recruitment and important areas of employment. So as a job-seeking student or graduate, it's really important that you understand the opportunities that are actually on your doorstep, really down the road even, or certainly in your hometown, city or region. This is a particular area where SMEs come into play, and Amber will talk more about SMEs in a moment. And again, your career service will have very well developed connections with local and regional employers, large and small. So it's not just about having to work for national outfits that may be based in the Southeast or London. It's also about what's in your own region. And finally, sticking things together, this is related to the whole process, actually. It's a really important point. You'll hear this more than once this week. It's something to do with social media, particularly LinkedIn, and it's about using it to the maximum. So just as an example, like years ago, and not that long ago, actually, it was really hard to get hold of very comprehensive information about companies. And the process of research was quite detailed and could be very laborious, and let alone the people who actually work in them. But now it's all at your fingertips. So this would be a whole session on this, and you've probably done this at university and career services, etc., and employability. But just a couple of things about that. First, obviously, you have to do as much research as you can into the companies that you're applying to, and make sure that the knowledge you acquire is communicated throughout the application process, including obviously when you go for an interview. Now, recruiters know that you're probably applying for more than one job, obviously, because they're realistic and they know how it works. But they do expect you to feel that you've taken a particular interest in them. And that's referring back to that comment from one of the adverts that we looked at earlier on. And LinkedIn is an amazing resource for this, because you can get all sorts of company information from the official sites of companies on LinkedIn, from the posts. You can find out what they're talking about, what industries they're in, what they're how well they're doing, what their areas of activity are. But also you can find out the names of people, so that when you go to an interview, you can actually know about some of the people sitting across the table from you, whether that's a real table or a virtual one on Zoom, etc. And that all makes the process and the encounter of an interview, for example, a meeting of equals, It should be the case because you've got knowledge and information, and all of that you share, and you share that in a sensible way, in a thoughtful way, is very, very impressive, because it shows that you've done the research into the background, experience, interests of the company and the people, etc. And it's still fair to say that most students and graduates are not making best use of all this, particularly the potential of LinkedIn, I think. So if you crack this, you'll be giving yourself a definite advantage in the whole job application and interview process, etc. So on that positive point, I am now going to hand over to Amber, and Amber will be talking to you all about working for a small business. Amber, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. So yes, we're going to talk now about working for a small business. So hopefully this will give you a really good overview of what to expect with this, because it might not be something that you've already considered. So let me tell you first who I am. So my name is Amber Bythway. I'm a project consultant for an independent people and talent consultancy called Grad Consult, that based in Sheffield. We work with around 70% of the UK's universities doing skill sessions to help prepare students and also recent graduates for their transition from education through to employability. So we help to sort of give graduates really a competitive advantage really when they're entering the graduate labour market. Now, one of the things that I work on quite a lot is a regional graduate scheme called RISE, which you'll see on this page here. And that's based in the Sheffield City region. And through that scheme, we've managed to recruit over 500 graduates into small to medium-sized businesses. So we have a lot of knowledge in this area of being able to support small businesses in hiring graduates, because it's often sort of a myth really that there aren't enough jobs. As Chris has said, sometimes we can get sort of lost in some of the rhetoric that is thrown around in the media, and we don't realise actually there are so many jobs on our doorstep. So I'm going to talk to you about how you can find and you can source these roles. So first of all, let's start by talking about working at an SME. Now, when I say the term SME, I'm not going to make an assumption that everyone will know what that term means immediately. So a small to medium enterprise is essentially a business that employs between 2 to 250 employees. And they can really vary in size. So it could be that you're working with another person. It could be that you work with a handful of people, or you could be working in an organisation that does employ a few hundred people, and they can significantly vary in size. And according to the Federation of Small Businesses, the SMEs account for 3/5 of employment in the UK. That's 3/5 of employment in the UK, and around half of turnover in the UK's private sector. So the SMEs account for a huge percentage of the business population in the UK, and that's really worth knowing, because we see a lot of corporate names all of the time, particularly when we're at university, and it can be easy to get swept up in thinking that's all there is, but there is so much more. So SMEs do account for the majority of the business population in the UK. Now, why should you work for an SME? Well, there are lots of reasons why it's great to work at an SME. Number one, I think, is that you can make a real impact. So when you're doing really good work at an SME, it's really likely it's going to be noticed by your team, because you're going to be working in a small team, and it means that you can get your ideas listened to by the leaders of the businesses, and you will have opportunities to prove yourself and your worth, and even have your potential realised. This could even mean that you're able to develop, and it could lead to career progression quite soon when you're in a business. So if you're taking on increased responsibilities and you're bringing great ideas to the table and amazing contributions, you could not only be rewarded with those promotions and pay rises, but you can actually see those ideas becoming reality. And I've certainly worked in small businesses where I've been able to bring ideas to the table, and then I've seen it turned into a product. And coming in as someone who was younger and perhaps had different perspectives on the world, is that I was able to bring that in and then see the good that came of those ideas in terms of reality and of turnover and the money that we were making as a business. So there is an impact there that you can make that a real difference. The other thing that we should talk about is that in an SME, it's very likely that you're going to be able to do a lot of varied work. And this will mean that you're developing a varied skill set. So when you're working in a small business, you could be presented with lots of opportunities where you might have to get stuck into tasks that aren't typically associated with your role. So it might not be things that necessarily you expected to even be on your job description. Now, I'm going to give you a real life example here, because when I was at university, I managed to secure myself a role as a part-time job as an administration assistant at our local job shop, which helped to support students in finding part-time, temporary and seasonal roles. Now, when I started, I was just expecting to gain some skills in administration and move away from the jobs I'd had previously in hospitality, making coffees and being a barista, right? But little would I have known or realised at the time how pivotal that opportunity was for me. So by the time I had graduated, I'd become the recruitment and marketing coordinator at the job shop. And what I had developed was a whole plethora of skills. So what I'd learned included organising jobs fairs. I was recruiting and training temporary workers. I was filling temp positions. I was interviewing students for roles. I was assisting with the payroll. I was marketing for the business. I was conducting business development, and I was also doing some HR bits. And what I realised, and I really loved that job, was how pivotal it was from the development of my professional skill set and also my soft skills. And I realised by being in a small business that you can really get stuck in and gain a great understanding of how the whole business works, and not just be working in silos where if you were in a graduate marketing role, for example, you were just focusing on the marketing and not doing anything to do with business development or HR or the payroll and the finance side of things. My understanding of how a business works really grew by working in a small business, because often there are opportunities where you need to get stuck in and have all hands on deck. So it could be that you're doing marketing one day and packing the box in the warehouse the next, whatever it is that needs to be done to help the business keep going. Now, that's another benefit, I think, of working for an SME. And lastly, I think one that I really want to focus on is working with business leaders. And you get to work, you get to work really closely with these people if you're in a small business, because you know them personally. Now, if you were to work for some of the big names, say, for example, HSBC or Microsoft, very few employees will work directly with senior leadership. So when you're working in a small business, you actually could be working with the senior leaders directly as colleagues. So this will mean you get to showcase your skills to senior leaders within the business. You're being supported by them and developed, and you're able to provide that input with the business ideas, what I said at the beginning there about making that real impact and it being seen. So in my workplace at Grad Consult, I feel extremely grateful. I get to work closely alongside the senior leaders of the business, who also happen to be experts in the field of early careers. And there are lots of other benefits of working for an SME. I'm not going to go into them in lots of detail, but some of them include the fact that they can be perhaps even more personable. They can have that sort of family feel, depending on the type of business that you're working at. They can often offer greater flexibility and have less stringent rules. And SMEs are everywhere, as Chris was saying. You don't necessarily need to move for a job at an SME, because they will be in your home regions. They will be in the places that you've studied, lived, and worked. Wherever it is that you are, you will be able to find SMEs across the country. So it's not a case of having to move to London or having to move to another place to secure a role. So let's talk briefly about expectation versus reality. So it can be an extremely competitive process trying to secure a graduate role. And when you're graduating in your chosen field of study, you're graduating alongside millions of other people who are entering the world of work at the same time. Before I graduated, I had this expectation that I should be securing a job on a corporate graduate scheme with a big name organisation. But what I didn't realise was how limited the spots on graduate schemes are. So the latest figure is approximately 16% of graduates secure a place on those big graduate schemes that you see at big careers fairs at universities. And when you're applying to these schemes, you can expect that you might be applying against up to 50,000 to 250,000 graduates, especially in industries such as financial and professional services that receive the highest number of applications. Now, I'm not saying this to put you off, but why I'm saying this is because it's a significantly long recruitment process, and it's very competitive because there's a huge number of stages to whittle down the candidates. And Asia's going to talk to you a little bit more about recruitment processes and how to be able to succeed in these in the next section. But personally, I faced a number of rejections whilst going down this route. And I didn't realise that there were other options that I could have investigated. So the good news is that approximately 1/3 of graduates will go on to work at an SME. There are over 5.5 million small businesses in the UK, and many of them are going to hire and train graduates. I wouldn't expect them to be household names that you have heard of, but they can be just as exciting as those big names. And you won't be competing against potentially hundreds of thousands of graduates. So what should you expect? Okay, right. So small name, big clients. So let's talk about that. Okay. So I work for Grad Consult, and we consist of less than 15 people in our team. It's very likely, unless we've come to one of your universities, there might be some people in the room that have heard of us, you never know, that you've probably never heard of us. But our clients are huge. We've worked with approximately 70% of the UK's universities, and we work with big name employers across a variety of industries across the world that are recruiting graduates and developing strategies to do so. So working for an SME doesn't mean you won't get to work with those big name clients and brands. At Grad Consult, we've been able to do all of that. And personally, I'm constantly building an amazing network of connections within my industry. So just because it might be a name that you haven't heard of, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be working on exciting projects and with exciting brands. So what should you expect? Well, let's talk about 3 things. Realistic salary expectations. So salaries will vary in SMEs, but you can expect that around £22,000 is the average. 20,000 to 25,000, I would say. Now, London offers the highest starting salary of all the regions in the UK for SMEs. That's with an average of around £25,000 for starting salary. It's unlikely that a small to medium-sized business is going to be offering salaries starting at £30,000 to £35,000 in your first role. Often, you'll get to these salaries with years of experience. So SMEs will have cross-checked and compared the salary ranges with similar roles in your region and industry. Now, please bear in mind, I'm saying this as a general statistic here. Obviously, industries are different compared to what it is, but you can trust that SMEs will have ensured that the salary that they have provided for the role is fair for the level of responsibility held in that role. What you also expect is that they will have shorter and more traditional recruitment processes. So this isn't like large-scale recruitment where a corporate organisation might be hiring for hundreds of graduates that year. Don't expect that you're going to be going through a bunch of situational judgment tests, psychometrics, assessment centres and interviews with a process that takes half a year. Generally, you will expect that the recruitment process will be quite quick in the sense of a few stages, but they want to get this process done as quickly as possible to get someone in. So it could be that you're doing a CV and application, then you're going to have a quick assessment or maybe a test, and you might do your interview. So it really depends on what that business does, but you're not going to be spending months going through this recruitment process. And lastly, and Chris already mentioned this, but I think it's a really important point to drum home really, is that many employers from SMEs are going to be degree agnostic. That means that you don't always necessarily have to have a specific degree to work in most roles. Now, unless an SME is hiring for a graduate engineer or an organic chemist, it absolutely makes sense that you will require a graduate from a specific degree discipline for those types of roles if you're going into something that's quite specialist. But on the other hand, many graduate roles, it's long gone, this idea and this expectation that you must have a specific degree to perform in the role. The UK has a really flexible and non-linear graduate jobs market, which means that the majority of graduate jobs are open to graduates from all subjects. That could be from fine art to physics, and non-linear career paths are extremely the norm for graduates. And it means that SMEs are recognising that you're extremely adaptable, that you come with a brilliant set of transferable skills when you leave university, no matter what your degree discipline is. So what do SMEs expect from graduates? Well, first of all, they expect this willingness to learn and try new things. And Chris already managed to find an advert that literally had those words in. They're expecting you to be able to come in, listen and learn and understand their company, begin to understand the industry. They're not expecting you to be a ready-made expert, but they want you to throw yourself right in to learn what it's all about. They also want you to have that readiness to be moulded into what is needed within the business. Now, an SME is going to be hiring you probably because their business is going to be growing and they need more hands on deck to be able to achieve what they want to achieve as a business. So they're going to want you to come along for that ride. And it means that when you're coming in as a graduate, you don't already have any of those bad habits that sometimes more experienced people can have. It means that you can learn everything about that business without coming in with any preconceptions. So you have that readiness to be moulded into what is needed for them. They also want you to come in with new perspectives and new ideas. Not all graduates are going to be 21 when they leave. Some of them will be mature, but we can expect on the whole that most graduates, they're coming through at different time, different generation. You're going to be working with multiple generations of people when you enter the workplace. You do have new perspectives and new ideas to bring. And I already told you how in my first role, I was able to bring some new ideas to the table, things that my colleagues hadn't considered. And that was due to, the sort of surroundings and circumstances of the environment that I have lived in, that I've been able to come up with some new ideas and things that actually this business hadn't considered already. And you could be doing the same thing as well. And SMEs really appreciate that. That's what helps them move forward in their industries. And they also know that SMEs really know that graduates are a proven return on investment. So, many employers fear that once graduates are trained that they leave, but that's not the case. They really deliver on return of investment. So according to the Institute of Student Employers, graduate retention varies by sector, but on average, an employer retains 50% of its intake over 5 years. So the average length of stay in a first job is around 4.5 years. So it's actually a really long time, and you're able to be there to help that company realise their potential and fulfil the needs of the business. And lastly, you've got core transferable skills from your degree as well. So those are those things that you might need, that you might already have, that you're able to apply into the business. So lots of good things there that SMEs are expecting from graduates. So let's talk about where we can find these roles. So there's lots of different places to find roles. First of all, jobs boards. not just one, use lots of them. Now, I'm going to plug Prospects because I think it's one of the best ones actually for graduate recruitment. Definitely use that as one of your first ports of call. But you've got loads that you're probably already aware about. Indeed, LinkedIn, it could be Monster or Reed. It could be regional jobs boards as well, ones in your local area, or sector-specific job sites as well. So if you know that you want to go into marketing, you could look at a marketing jobs board. If you know you want to go into law, you could look at that. Social media. Are you interested in an organisation? Follow them on social media. Read the articles they post on LinkedIn. Keep an eye out for those roles. They'll likely share them on with their connections, their posts on social media. They might ask for connections, recommendations. If you're interested in a particular company as well, connect with those key players. Show them that you're interested. They often love speculative applications that can lead to roles if you show you're really keen. So send them an email. Say, I'm really interested in this business. You might get something back. And also, regional graduate recruitment schemes are also becoming increasingly popular to retain graduates in the cities that they either grew up in or study in. So, for example, I work on the RISE graduate scheme. It's helped more than 500 graduates to secure graduate roles in Sheffield and beyond. So if you're interested in working in cities like that, make sure to have a look and see if there is anything like that. A lot of universities are doing their own versions of schemes like that. Keep in touch with your universities as well, especially if you're a recent graduate or you're still studying. They have lots of contacts as well. So let's move on just to one of the last slides. So how do I know if the role is appropriate? Just some last tips here really for you. Look for entry-level titles. So this is things like assistant, coordinator, engineer, executive, junior, graduate. If you're confused about titles and what you should be looking for, make sure that you have a Google of it, because it can be quite difficult to associate the difference between titles and levels of seniority. Not all graduate roles at SMEs are going to have the word graduate in the title, and that's really important. So look for those types of roles, the assistant, coordinator, graduate, executive. That will help you to be able to find them. Obviously, also look at realistic salary expectations. If you're looking at roles that are sort of 40k plus in an SME, it's probably not a suitable graduate role. Do your research on the industries and roles that you're interested in. Look for those junior entry-level roles. You should see that they have similar salary levels like what I said earlier. And read the job spec as well, because it will also tell you what experience they're looking for. If it's saying that they want you to have 4 years of work experience in the industry, avoid applying for that, because again, it won't be suitable for a graduate. And lastly, do your research. Small business owners, they love hearing about people who want to work for their business. So they want you to be passionate about the product or the service when they're recruiting graduates. So show them you're interested and do your homework, because plug as many relevant skills, experiences you have, and that willingness to learn, and you will succeed. So that is all really on working for an SME. Sorry if I've slightly overrun, but Aisha, I'm going to hand over to you now to talk about graduate recruitment processes in more detail and those top tips for assessment centres. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everyone. I'm Asha. I work for GISC alongside Prospects with Chris. So I'm going to talk today to all of you about assessment centres and what they mean, a bit of hints and tips, what you can take away from that as well. And how can you look for the right organisation as well? So, you could be like, as Chris and Amber have said, there's so many different ways you can search for graduate schemes, but are they in your values, your beliefs? Is it something you want to work for? You can go for the big FTSE 100 companies. You can go to SMEs as well. But where do you see yourself in your future, in your career as well? So I'm just going to go through my slides. So GISC, who are we? We are a vision to be world-class leaders for technology-driven education and research. With GISC, our mission is to improve lives through education and research, and believe technology for good that drives us every day together, and we can reimagine the future. So GISC is a technology education within education. So at university, you would have used our resources. So looking at uploading journals, through Open Athens and things like that. So you would have used GISC products and probably didn't realise it. But GISC also do assessment centres, and we do employ graduates. So what is an assessment centre? First thing you need to do and prepare for is research the company. So if you like the sound of GISC, there's a link in the chat where we have plugged in there for you to have a look at the graduate schemes, which will be opening around Christmas time. And we are a technology company, but an assessment centre, it could be done virtually, it could be done remotely. At GISC, we do it remotely because we like to recruit graduates from all over the UK. So we have graduates from Scotland as well as within England. We believe that we don't want to, how can I say, just limit ourselves to our offices, where some organisations may do the same as well. So it's really good to research on that. There was a question on about graduate schemes. If you're not office-based, you know, would you have the right exposure and more experience if you're not office-based? Certainly, we have graduates that are in 8-month rotations around GISC in our technology department, and they can also dip into other teams if they feel like they want some extra experience working projects alongside other teams as well. And that's something you probably do need to research on. Are these organisations that you're applying for, are they flexible? So what is an assessment centre? So this could be a half day, a full day of interviews and a combination of tasks that are suitable for that job that you're applying for. So I think for me is, if you research on the website, they should have a recruitment page where they'll talk about their assessment centre. What does that look and feel like? Is there any pre-tests that they do as well? At GISC, we don't tend to do a lot of pre-tests. We like to assess our candidates on strengths base. So we don't mind if you don't have that specific work experience, because if you're studying and don't have time to obviously have a job at the same time, we don't want to disadvantage students applying because they don't have work experience, because a graduate scheme is about giving that work experience. So in assessment centres, you have that chance to demonstrate a wider range of skills. You know, that could be face-to-face, it could be done on a Zoom call as well. It could be hosted over half a day or a full day, like I said before. And it could be joined up to probably about 6 candidates. And there could be team exercises where, you know, you could be assessed working, how do you work as a team? How do you communicate? It's really good to have a look at the organisation that you want to work for, and you're applying for assessment centre. What are the company reports saying? Do your research, like Amber and Chris have already said. It is so important to do your research. And I've done over probably 500 assessment centres, and I would know if a candidate has done their research on that organisation, because it would really show your passion, your drive to want to work for that organisation as well. So how will I be assessed at these assessment centres? So normally assessors, there was score, and these assessments are probably from HR or different parts of the business, depending on what organisation you're going to the assessment centre with. So your it would be scored against like their competency framework. So sometimes, here's a bit of a tip, if you look at the company core values, they normally align to what they want the grads to showcase, because if you're successful, you'll be at the heart of that organization, and you know, showcasing those values as well. So, you know, are they inclusive? Do they make sure that they bring the team together, and you do really good teamwork skills? You know, have you got good communication skills? Are you resilient? You know, things like that. So it's really good to do your research on the company and really understand their culture, because normally that comes across at the assessment centre. Throughout the whole assessment centre, you will be assessed by various different assessors to make it a fair process. So if you don't do well at a group exercise or your interview, don't beat yourself up, because you can obviously score higher in the next task. Where candidates fall short is, oh no, I didn't do great on my first task. The first task is always going to be hard because it's the first one and you're just trying to get your feet into the assessment centre. And then we've realised that on the second and the third task, candidates fly because they feel more comfortable. They've got to know the assessors. So don't feel that if you haven't done good on one task, you've not smashed it in another task. So please don't, be hard on yourself on that. And then after the assessment centre, all the assessors come together and do a bit of a wash up. And this is the same term all organisations use. And each assessor that's assessed each candidate, they all have that bit of a chat about, how they feel each candidate have done, and score them really fairly. And once they've done that, then they should get back to you within the next week or 2 weeks. But you should ask the questions of, at the end of the interview, when will I hear back? Because then that will give you some indication on when you will get some feedback as well. So how to prepare. So one thing that I find when candidates call, the recruitment partner, whoever that may be, and they ask really clear questions and get to know the organisation really well, that is a key bonus because, that goes to show that you're going above and beyond what not other candidates would do, is to ask about what the organisation culture is, what are you looking for. Sometimes that's not clear on an organisation's website. You probably can't find any feedback where other candidates have gone and, applied for that organisation as well. So it's really good to have that phone call, pick up the phone, that just shows that determination as well. Give yourself time to complete and practice any material that you've been asked to do to prepare. So sometimes organisations will ask you to prepare a presentation on why you want to apply for that role. And I think it's really good if you really structure that presentation. It doesn't have to be long. You don't, some organisations don't want you to come and present a PowerPoint. That you could just talk to them, as long as it has a real clear structure and you've got a clear start, middle and ending as to why you want to apply for that organisation and why that role, because that obviously will show your passion and your understanding as well of that organisation. The other one is identify which skills, interests and experience the employer is looking for by revisiting their job description. This has already been mentioned, and any material that's been sent to you. So really, really do your homework, do your research on that organisation, because the more you do, there could be a question in an interview of, what is sustainability? That's one of the top questions organisations ask. Sustainability within that organisation, what does that mean for you in your role and how would that impact the organisation? Like we said, we want grads to come in with fresh ideas, really push the boundaries and, really challenge employees that already work for that organisation, because they always say, well, we've always done this. Well, we want grads to come in with fresh ideas and really push that. Another thing to do is read organisations' websites, the social media profiles, their business plan, the financial reports and CSR reports as well, and their strategy, because they are really key to every organisation. And obviously look at news, trends, and who are their competitors. I mean, looking at an organisation's competitors really sets you apart from other candidates as well, because it shows you really understand that job sector and that market as well, because there could be some questions on that also. And obviously utilise tools your university and career service might offer. Obviously we've got prospects here as well, so please go on their website and have a look as well. So I'm just going to go into hints and tips. So one thing we love seeing in candidates is being confident. Yes, that may not show in the first task because everyone's really nervous, and it's quite daunting when assessors are staring at you, if it's in a room, across the table, or on a Zoom call. If you show you're very positive, you've got high energy, that really comes across really well. Don't worry about what other candidates are doing as well, because that can be quite off-putting. Really concentrate on performing well in that task. Like I said before, do not dwell on your mistakes, because we don't want that to hinder your performance. At GISC, we look at strengths-based. So we don't ask competency-based questions, because if you've never had work experience before, it's not really fair. If we ask you, tell me about a time you've done X, Y, and Z. We ask about your strengths and ask about certain questions about how to hone in on those strengths, because we want you to do the best. And in any assessment centre you attend, no one wants to trip you up. They just want you to perform at your best level. And another thing that we like seeing is when candidates bring in other candidates are not talking as much. Sometimes, you know, everyone's different. You know, we like to be very inclusive as well. So it's really good to help other candidates into those team discussions. It shows team leadership skills, shows good communication as well. And it shows that you really want to work well as a team. So if you do see someone that is struggling, don't say, do you have anything to add? Just say, is there anything you might want to help with? You know, if you've got any other ideas. You know, sometimes they might not want to be put on the spot and they'll come in at the, you know, in their own time, but it's really good to help other group members that are not talking to get into the group task. Understand the requirements of each task as well. You know, really digest that brief. And if you don't understand it, ask the question. We can revisit it, go over it again, and to get you to understand that, because sometimes it takes a while for people to digest the brief, and it can get really confusing when you're already stressed as it is. You know, get into the assessment centre, want to do well, ask the question. No question is a silly question, and if they're a good organisation, they will make you feel comfortable. Also, try and maintain a friendly and polite manner with everyone you meet. And remember that you are always being assessed, even if you're not in that group task and, you know, you're coming into the group and you're having that break, you are being watched, because we're looking at how you interact with other people as well. Most importantly, relax and let your personality shine, because as assessors, we want you to feel the warmth of your individuality. We want to know who you are as a person. As much as we're interviewing you, you also need to know where, or the organisation that you're wanting to join, they're right for you as well, and it's a good fit. And whatever you do, please, please, please ask loads of questions, at least 2 to 3. Really think about what questions you are asking. The amount of assessment centres being in, and people are like, no, we've got no questions. I'm like, oh, okay. But it's really great to ask those questions, because it shows you really thought about why you want to work for that organisation as well. And I think that's nearly it, because I'm just conscious of time. These are the IT graduate schemes that we have at the moment. We've got places in IT graduates, in product and cyber. And also, another thing is that really look for what's the added benefit for working in that organisation. So for me, we do an out of bounds week with all the grads and apprentices together. We really push you. We take you to the Lake District. We do different team building skills, and we incorporate GISC's guiding principles. So, you know, what we want to see in our future graduates. And I think that's really, really important, that yes, you'll be on a graduate scheme, but what are you getting for your graduate scheme? Are you getting any development alongside the graduate scheme as well? You know, so I do, you know, project management modules with our graduates. We do extra project work where the cohort gets together. We do insights. We look at your personality traits. So what does that organisation do? Do your research. Yes, you'll be on a graduate scheme, but what are they doing for you to help benefit you in your future career? And where's your career progression in that organisation? That's something you really need to think about as well. So that is like literally, I could have gone for longer, a whistle-stop tour on hints and tips on assessment centres. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat, and I'll pass over to Eloise. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you so much. Such an insightful presentation, and I think especially those tip slides where you gave all the tips for the assessment centres. Lots of people were asking in the chat before you showed that, give us some tips, and then I think you exactly hit on what people wanted there. So definitely come back to this recording if you need those tips. If you need some extra advice, you will be able to come back to these slides. And thank you so much for all of your insight. We just have a couple of minutes. I know Chris has been very helpfully in the chat answering some of your questions already. So I actually think there are only a couple of things left. Quite a few people asking about SMEs maybe this is something, Amber, you can touch on. People asking, is there any data about the biggest industries that SMEs are focused on? Also, people asking very specific questions like, would an SME offer a visa? What's kind of the application process for each? But would it just depend on which SME you're kind of applying to?
Absolutely. So yeah, you've just got to have that conversation with the employer, really, when you're at offer stage, when you've been offered a role, at that organisation, you can have that sort of conversation about visa, sort of like interview and offer stage. You don't really want to bring it up too soon, because at the end of the day, I was like, if they really like you, they'll offer the role to you. You don't want to, kind of get them to kind of question whether they should hire you based on your visa status. If you can really sell to them how great you are, they might be more willing to be able to sponsor you for a visa, which I think is the best approach really for that. And about the question as well about SMEs in your preferred industry, best thing to do is, lots of research, even using search engines like Google, but also LinkedIn, about what businesses there are in the places that you live. If you're looking to stay nearby or move or work in a certain area, you can just do all of that research based on location, actually find lots of businesses that you've never heard of before. And there's a great LinkedIn alumni tool as well that you can use. If you go to a university's LinkedIn page and you go to the alumni tab, if you type in your degree and what you've done, you'll be able to see where other graduates are and what companies they're working for. And there's sometimes some really interesting little ones that pop up that you might not have heard of. So that's a whistle stop.
Yeah, that's a great tip, actually. I hadn't even thought of that. So make sure that you have a go at that if you are interested. Will you be sent the link to the recorded webinar? I think so, if you've registered. Otherwise, it will be back on the website. So double check. And yeah, if you have any other questions, make sure you have those links that we dropped in the chat, and you can probably find contact details on one of those somewhere if you have extra questions. But our time is up, unfortunately. So thank you so much for your presentation. Really insightful look at the graduate industry. So thank you so much. And yeah, hope you all enjoyed coming. Make sure you check back on the website for other events that are coming up this week. And thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your week.